Ignored my husband's intimate needs for years. Now he says he's not into me anymore and is divorcing me. How can I fix my mistake with my husband? I've been with my husband for 30 years, married for 27. We were high school sweethearts and married immediately. My husband took care of me. I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom when I got pregnant with our first child. He was reluctant at first but agreed. He made sure he took care of us, and I gave him more children, 5 in total, 3 girls and 2 boys. As the years went on, I wasn't in the mood. He voiced his complaints that I never initiate intimacy. I don't like to cuddle against him because I don't want him to think it will lead to sex. He asked for us to spoon, but I didn't want it to lead to sex. For the most part, he got it. But as the years went by, his issues became more vocal. I don't initiate, and according to him, we make love 2 or 3 times a month. He hasn't had a blowjob in years, which is correct. I no longer allow him to go down on me because I'm not feeling it. He complains that the only time I want to touch him in any form of affection is when we're out in public. He tells me time and time again that I will guilt trip him, and he would apologize. He offered couples and individual counseling for us, and I refused. Truthfully, I want to have sex when I want to make love. If it's once or twice a month, on those occasions when it's a week straight, it should be good enough for him. A quickie is 45 minutes, and he wants to go again. Sometimes, I tell him to hurry up because he's sweating all over me. It got to the point where I would hide my douche when I'm done with my cycle or pretend I'm still on it just to eliminate him trying to seduce me. I love my husband. Granted, he can be a bit childish when he hasn't made love for a while. Then, I would give him an ad, just lay there or bend over. I don't want him to kiss me again. It's a me issue. I just don't know why, but it's how I'm feeling. One day, I began to think, when was the last time my husband touched me? He usually would cop a feel when he walks by me, compliment me, or give me a hug out of nowhere. He still kissed me goodbye when he leaves for work, kissed me when he came home, and kissed me goodnight. But it felt different. I tried to open mouth kiss him on a few occasions, and he kept his lips closed. I noticed he's been going on walks with the boys more, and when he's lying in bed next to me, he's now focused on one of our sons. Switching on a few nights, I tried to spoon with him as it led to what I know I want. But he ignored me, and it was messing with my head. I swear he's having an affair. He began wearing arm and leg weights with the boys when they go out for walks. I honestly made myself believe that he was making himself look good for his mistress. I confided in my 2 sisters and friends, and they looked at me as if I was crazy. They told me that my husband goes to work and then comes home. He doesn't hang out or do guys' nights. He watches TV, chops wood, does yard work, fixes things in the garage, and is the family taxi. They asked me when he would have the time to have an affair, and I couldn't answer. Then I realized it's been 6 months since we've been intimate. 6 months since he touched me in any way. Just his basic kisses, and that is it. It all came to a head last night. I came out of the shower wearing a robe, stood at the edge of the bed, and removed it to reveal some sexy lingerie. He just looked at me, rolled his eyes, turned off the lights, and said good night. I was humiliated, started crying, and asked him if he was having an affair. He turned on the lights, looked at me with no emotion, and said he's not sensually into me anymore. I couldn't believe what he said. Before I could say anything, he continued, saying that I had rejected him for so long that he didn't want me sensually anymore. He pointed out everything I did to avoid making love with him and questioned what my excuse was in the years before, even though I might be menopausal now. He mentioned the lack of oral lovemaking, the lack of intimacy, and that we don't cuddle when we watch TV or lie in bed together. I'd rather watch commercials than make out with him or purposely stay up late on those nights. I would tell him we would have sex, but nothing happened. He spoke about how he tried to tell me he was unhappy, but I made it his fault and made him feel guilty. He said he gave up trying to initiate with me. When I asked if he was having an affair, he laughed and said no, but he'll be asking for a divorce once our youngest graduates high school, which is a year from now. It's like the air was taken out of their lungs when they reached that point. He told me he drafted a lump sum alimony by giving me the house. He said he will not break his vows, but he's done trying. He's done with the rejection and feeling used. When I cried and tried to tell him how much I love him, he said that I love what he provided but not him. That made me cry harder. I offered couples counseling, and he refused. I tried to force myself onto him, and that made him leave the bedroom and sleep in another room. This morning, I made him breakfast, and he walked up to me, kissed me good morning, ate his breakfast, and kissed me before he left. It was like he was a robot. I waited for the kids to leave before I broke down crying and called my sisters. When my sisters arrived at my house, I told them what he said. They asked if what he said was true, and when I confirmed, they chastised me. They asked why I never told them about our sex life. I shrugged. My younger sister told me I better fix it. My husband is a big brother and father figure to all my sisters and their kids. My eldest sister calls him the family keystone and told me that I really messed up and don't know how to fix it. He doesn't want me right now. My sisters were all trying to tell me how to fix it, and my youngest suggested trying Reddit, which made my other sisters roll their eyes. However, I'm desperate. I'm scared. He's been the only man I ever loved, and I know I took him for granted. Please, I need advice. Please help me. Story 2. Married male, cheated on by SO and now in process of reconciliation. It occurred to me that I have turned into someone who alternates between wallowing in self-pity and indulging in self-righteous indignation. That's not who I want to be. All it does is make me miserable. My life experience has taught me that you can't dictate someone else's actions or feelings. You can merely act on your own in a way that does minimal harm. If that sounds like an impossible goal, it actually isn't. I used to get tremendously affected by bad drivers earlier. Then I realized all that raging only puts myself in danger and my health at risk. So now I am not that affected anymore. I focus on driving safely, defensively, and minimize the chance of confrontation or incident. I bring a lot of expectations to my relationship, both from myself and my SO, and I realize now the burden of those expectations can cause issues. If anything, the affair taught me to look inwards at myself a lot more. I always prided myself on being a loyal husband, a good father, a provider for the family. But now I realize that probably isn't enough. People have dreams, aspirations, hidden desires. They need to be validated by those they love. They need to feel not judged. Looking at it from my SO's point of view, her husband, me, made some life choices that took him away, albeit temporarily, from her. He left her to mind the household and manage the growing kids while he was away on work a lot, and for extended periods of time. Perhaps if he'd asked her, she'd have told him that what they had was enough, there was no need for a bigger house, and she would manage fine with her trusty beat-up car a little longer. After all, he did insist on sending it for a proper servicing once a year. Perhaps she was happier with him close to her, sharing in the household duties, being a proper dad instead of her having to double up as both parents. Perhaps she thought I had my share of fun on the road, or that the distance was making us distant emotionally as well. Or it could be that she had some plans for herself. Turning 40 isn't easy, and it often brings a renewed focus on career, as you start to worry whether what you are doing is merely a means of making money, or something deeper and more meaningful. It's happened with me as well. She stood by me resolutely while I worked out my own career-related stuff a few years earlier. Perhaps she expected the same from me, and felt my attitude to her work was dismissive. Maybe we didn't share the same ideas of what constituted loyalty. Maybe she thought it was okay in my eyes for her to seek emotional support while I was not available. It seemed to come as a shock to her when I told her, after finding out, that the fact that she slept with the AP didn't hurt as much as the fact that she told him, and others, that she loved him. A lot of her friends probably have work spouses and their husbands are probably aware of it. Maybe I am the exception here. Why did the emotional part of the affair hurt me so much, though? Was it because I felt insecure that we no longer had what we once shared? Was it an assumption I made that, having survived and thrived through a decade and a half of marriage, with all its ups and downs, a temporary physical separation would not matter, that our emotional bonding would tide us through? I haven't confided in too many people about the affair, but those that I did talk to were unequivocal that it was her fault. This includes my SO as well, who blames herself squarely for the affair and its aftermath. We are reconciling solely because it was my choice to do so, after she confessed unreservedly, after being caught out and begged me to take her back. So there is really no reason to turn the spotlight on myself, to ask these soul-searching questions on whether I was, in fact, as good a husband as I imagined myself to be. But it's really also the only way to move on. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying I was responsible for the affair. That burden is hers, and she knows it. But things don't happen for one reason alone. And if I can come out of this a better human being, it might be just the thing that prevents this sort of stuff happening again. Because, believe me, it changes everything in a way that can never be fully remedied. And I don't want to go through that ever again. Has anyone gone through something similar? Update. Summary. My wife of then 15 years cheated on me with her boss 5 years ago, and repeatedly denied it till confronted with incontrovertible evidence and a threat to divorce. We stayed together primarily because I didn't want a divorce, which would be hard on the family. I was torn up about it and posted here pondering my own role in the affair having taken place. Reddit stepped up and assured me it wasn't so. I read every reply on that thread and it really helped me largely relieve myself of the burden of feeling I had somehow precipitated the affair by my own actions, be it by being away on work for long periods or not paying enough attention to her needs, etc. 5 years down, we are still together. That might be perplexing to some, but let me answer some questions you may have. Did I forgive her? Yes. It took a while and several long, difficult conversations for her to realize that I desperately needed to know why it happened. She took full responsibility for the affair and said that hurting me the way she did was the worst mistake she has ever made in her life and something that would haunt her forever. Did she stray again? There were several Redditors who reminded me of the old adage, once a cheater, always a cheater. But she did all the right things, quit that job, broke of all ties with AP, apologized repeatedly for what she did to me and the family. Do I trust her? Well, yes and no. I go through her texts and have her location tracked, mutually, but as time passed, found myself doing so less and less. There haven't been any red flags. How did we repair the relationship? I'd mentioned in the old post that we were good at doing projects together. Managing COVID was a big one. Our kids lost 2 grandparents in 2 years and almost a third. We moved into a bigger place, our dream home, and that took up a lot of energy and attention. Got a dog, which has just been an amazing and unique parenting experience. Kids are older now, one has started college. We continue to travel for pleasure occasionally, a shared passion. Another thing I realized was the need to have a life outside of us, so I put together a band and we perform a few gigs a year. I took control of my career and landed a better and less stressful job. Encouraged her to pursue her home-based business and eventually to land a job with a startup in a different field from where she was earlier. We spend time together and talk about stuff that's bothering us. We do fight on occasion but focus on resolving things rather than let them simmer. What about the enablers? I had mentioned she has a few friends who are aware of and even actively encouraged her to pursue the affair despite being close to me as well. For a while after moving on, I voiced my discontent that these people were still in my life, but her stand was that she alone was responsible for the affair, and not them. I finally realized that all I needed to do was to cut them out of my own life and not bother about anything else. I systematically went about it and am now NC with that bunch. Nothing dramatic, just quietly cut the cord. She is still friends with them, but she knows how I feel, so meets them only on occasion, and is much more transactional with them. How am I now? I have to say that, despite having some of the emotions come up every now and then, by and large I am happy. My family and career keep me busy and fulfilled. My music keeps me sane. I have actively dialed down the drama in my life, a big contributor being no longer close to those enabler friends. I've consciously pursued my own interests, and am a bit more assertive about my own needs. I am attentive to hers and try not to argue or nitpick, which have been integral to my nature for a long time. So things go on, and I guess 5 years is good enough to call myself an affair survivor. We celebrated our 20th anniversary and it was wonderful. Thanks again for listening and all those helpful comments from way back. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have been able to get back on my feet had it not been for all of you. Story 3. I can hardly type this out because thinking about it makes me so angry. Earlier this year, my husband, 31 male, and I decided to spend Christmas with his family for the first time since my daughter was born last September. Since they live 12 hours away, we decided to stay for a few weeks before Christmas so they could spend loads of time with Annie. 13 months. We arrived early like we planned and everything was great. I've had a few disagreements with my mother-in-law Trish, 56 female, in the past over my parenting style. She criticized me for using disposable diapers, buying baby food from the supermarket, and not raising Annie as an organic baby, but everything seemed great. After a day or two settling in, my husband and I decided to pick up a few gifts from a mall around an hour away before the last-minute rush kicked in. My father-in-law, 60 male, tagged along. Trish said she was happy to take care of Annie. We got back a few hours later and Annie was down for a nap on a blanket I didn't recognize. Trish said one of her friends dropped by and gave it as an early Christmas gift. It looked pretty old, worn, but I figured one of her hippie friends was just recycling it. The next 2 weeks were fine, aside from Trish making a point to prepare meals for Annie from scratch. I mentioned this to my husband and he said to just let her be. Annie mostly mushed the food Trish gave her with her hands, threw the bowls on the floor, as she's been doing at the moment. Trish said it would take her a while to get used to nutritious meals. I was getting sick of her meddling, but it was only for a few weeks, so for the sake of the holidays I let it slide. The day after Christmas, Annie was really unsettled and wouldn't stop fidgeting and crying. I took her temperature and she had a fever, so I kept an eye on her for the next few days and it thankfully started to go down. This morning, she started to get a rash and blisters on her arms and legs and I freaked out. I was packing a bag to drive to see a doctor when Trish asked where I was going. I told her Annie had a rash and I was taking her to see a doctor. She got a weird smug smile on her face and told me there was nothing to worry about. When I asked her what she was talking about, she said without even looking at Annie that what she had was just chickenpox. I asked her how she could possibly know that and she casually admitted one of her friend's grandkids had chickenpox a few weeks ago, so she asked them to wipe a blanket over the child's arms, legs and face and bring it to her house. At this point I couldn't believe what I was hearing, so I asked if that blanket was the gift Annie was sleeping on. She said it was. I lost my crap. To be honest, I don't really remember what I said because I was up most of the night for 2 days checking on Annie. I just unleashed on Trish asking what the F was wrong with her. My husband and father-in-law came to try to calm things down and Trish dug in her heels and said chickenpox was the best and most natural thing for Annie to build up her immunity. I already have a vaccination schedule in place with my pediatrician, and she was booked in to get immunized for chickenpox at 18 months. We drove to see the doctor and he confirmed she had it. He said I'll have to cut Annie's nails short and might have to tape socks on her hands while she sleeps because kids so young can scratch until they bleed and that will leave scars. On the drive back, my husband started making excuses for Trish, that she was only doing what she thought was best. I couldn't believe he was defending her and we fought most of the way home until I told him to stop talking to me. Annie's been scratching like crazy and I just had to tape socks over her hands. Trish tried to talk to me when we got back and I told her to get out of my sight. We were meant to stay until Wednesday, but I just finished packing up our stuff so we can leave first thing in the morning. I'm so angry I can't even think. Whenever I hear Trish moving around in the kitchen, my heart starts beating faster and I feel like going out there and grabbing her by the hair. I don't ever want to see her again or let my daughter see her again. What can I say to make her and my husband realize the enormity of what she's done? I don't think I can speak coherently to their faces until Annie gets better. TLDR, mother-in-law deliberately infected my daughter with chickenpox. I'm so angry I feel like physically harming her. I need advice on what to say to make her realize what she's done. Update: thank you to everyone for your comments, inbox messages and advice after my original post. I read all the comments and messages, and they genuinely helped, especially the home remedies on how to stop itching. Since my first post was locked and deleted, I hope it's okay to briefly summarize here. Over the holidays, my mother-in-law Trish, 56 female, deliberately infected my daughter Annie, one female, with chickenpox by wrapping her in an infected blanket while she was left alone with her for several hours. Trish didn't tell anyone what she had done until Annie came down with a horrible fever and rash. Annie was booked in for her chickenpox vaccination at 18 months, but Trish thought what she did is 100% normal, despite the fact it's caused Annie significant pain and distress, and now scarring to her face and arms. When I found out what she did, I was livid and had a shouting match with her and packed up our things to leave the very next morning. It soon came out my husband Jack didn't think Trish had done anything wrong. On to the update. I didn't think it would be possible, but things got worse. I got up first thing the next morning and started packing our stuff into the car. Once I opened it up, I kept the keys in my pocket since I was going in and out. Usually we use Jack's set and leave mine in my bag. While I was packing, he sat in the kitchen with Trish and my father-in-law, 60 male, and chatted and had coffee like nothing was wrong. Annie was mercifully still asleep, so I just gently belted her in and closed her door when Jack came out and asked if I had everything. I said we were good to go as soon as he was. He said okay and calmly took out his key set and centrally locked the car, locking Annie in. I asked him what the hell he was doing and he said we wouldn't be leaving until I apologized to Trish. I think I was stunned into silence because he then took the chance to rehash what he said the previous day. That Trish thought she was doing what was best, that chickenpox doesn't slaughter you, and that I was making a bigger deal out of this than I needed to and making Trish feel bad. Yes, making her feel bad. All the comments from my last post were swirling around in my head, and I told him he needs to stop being a son and start being a father. He screwed up his face and said he would always be Trish's son, and that was the point. That nobody should speak to his mother the way I had the day before, and I needed to apologize to clear the air. I felt like I had entered some kind of weird Twilight Zone where I had accidentally married a 9-year-old instead of an adult man, so I just asked him to open the car so we could leave. He repeatedly refused, then walked back inside and said he would see me in there when I was acting more reasonable. You can probably guess what happened next. I'd left my bag on the passenger seat, so he probably assumed my keys were in there. Nope. I waited 30 seconds, then just hopped into the car and drove away. My phone blew up with a million calls from him, Trish, and my father-in-law. Eventually my mom and dad and my sister Jess, who I'm super close with, called as well. I'd briefly texted Jess about what was happening the day before, but she was stunned to get the full blow-by-blow. By the time I was on the open road, I asked her to phone Jack and tell him he could walk home for all I care. Once she heard my side of the story, and not Jack's, which was apparently that I had gone crazy, frightened Trish, snatched Annie and sped away, she calmed way down. Mom, Dad and Jess offered to start driving and meet me halfway so I could switch with one of them and wouldn't have to drive the full 12 hours by myself in one day. I was so grateful to see them. I pretty much broke down in a truck stop parking lot while I blubbered that I loved them. They all took turns driving while I had a rest. It was super reassuring to talk it over and hear that Trish and Jack are the unreasonable ones. Once we got back, I stayed at my parents' overnight and they said I could stay as long as I needed. The next few days were fairly tense. I was up most of the night making sure Annie didn't scratch, which she did anyway, somehow, and it seemed like she just cried and cried and cried until she was exhausted. She has 5 scars on her face and a few others on her arms from scratching. I know appearances shouldn't matter, but I'm so angry her skin is marked for life now over some stupid nonsense. This whole thing is just something I never expected to happen. I answered one of Jack's calls only to have him start a rant that he didn't recognize this person I had become, so I hung up on him. He was due to come back for the start of the work year, which I wasn't looking forward to, but I figured we could make it work as long as Trish was 12 hours away. Then at like 11 p.m. one night, I got a very short and formal text from father-in-law via Jack's phone, saying Trish had come down with shingles and was in the emergency room, that Jack was staying there to care for her, and that he would work from their house remotely once the year started back up. Jack's been there for the past few weeks tending to Mama's every whim. I'm sure she's put on an Oscar-worthy performance of having one foot in the grave, and according to Google it should be any day now that her painful, crusty pustules go gently into that sweet night. A few weeks ago I was honestly so tired and overwhelmed and in disbelief that I didn't know what to do. Now I'm back at home with people who actually care about me. I think I'm starting to realize how lucky I am to see the weird relationship with his mommy this early on. The fact that he cares more about Trish than his own daughter speaks volumes. When he eventually comes back, I think we'll have to have a serious talk about our future together. TLDR, mother-in-law infects my 1-year-old with chicken pox on purpose. Husband supports his mommy. He tries to force me to apologize to her by locking our daughter in the car, but I peace out with a spare set of keys. Husband has barely spoken to me in the weeks since. Mother-in-law came down with shingles, so he's staying with her to nurse her back to health. I don't think any amount of TLC can do the same for our relationship now I've seen the real him. Phew.